Sade's scissors hit the floor the same second her phone lit up with a Canadian number. She had not heard that number in 4 months. 4 months of sending money into silence, of calling and getting voicemail, of lying to her mother that everything was fine, that Kule was just busy, that Canada was different, that time zones were difficult. 4 months of believing her own lies until even she stopped trusting them. She picked up the phone. Sade? Kule? My love! His voice came through warm and familiar, wrapping around her like it always did, like something that belonged to her. I have been so stressed. This program is killing me. You know how it is? She sat down slowly on her work stool. Fabric pulled around her feet. I called you 31 times, Kule. I know. Baby, I'm sorry. It has been examination season. You know I would never ignore you deliberately. And just like that, the tightness in her chest loosened. Because that was the thing about Kule. He always knew exactly which version of himself to offer you when you are about to stop believing in him. How much do you need? A pause. Then, 300,000 naira. Accommodation renewal. They don't play here, Sade. She closed her eyes. Her savings account had exactly 340,000 naira in it. She had been setting it aside for a new industrial sewing machine. Her old one had been skipping stitches for 2 months. She said, I'll send it tomorrow. You are my backbone. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. You know that, right? When I come back, I will spend every day making this up to you. I will kiss every part of you that worked to get me here. I promise you that. She smiled despite herself. Just pass your exams, Kule. I love you. I love you too. She sent the money the next morning. The industrial sewing machine would have to wait. If you are just joining this channel, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because these stories will make you feel every single emotion. Now let us get back to Sade. This was not where her story started. It started 2 years before that phone call, in a small sitting room in Ikorodu, where Kule sat across from her mother and aunties with a proposal that sounded like a plan and turned out to be a transfer of burden. He wanted to go to Canada for his master's degree. He had the admission letter. He had the dream. What he did not have was the money. Sade has the land her father left her. If we sell it, that solves the tuition and the visa and the first-year course. When I come back, we build something bigger together. This is an investment. Her Auntie Runke hissed so loudly it cut through the room. That land is her inheritance. You are asking her to sell her father's legacy for your ambition? Kule had looked at Sade then, just at her, and something passed between them. The specific look of a man who knows a woman is already on his side even before she opens her mouth. I believe in him, Sade said quietly. She sold the land for 7 million naira, added 2 million from a cooperative loan she had been servicing for 18 months. She watched Kule's face at the airport departures, the way he held her face in both hands and kissed her slowly, deliberately, like someone memorizing something they planned to keep. Wait for me, he said against her lips. I'll be here, she whispered. She was. The first 6 months were full. He called every evening. He sent photographs of the campus, of his dormitory, of snow on his windowsill, things that felt so far away from her small Lagos shop that they seemed almost fictional. She worked double shifts, took in asoebi orders, bridal gowns, school uniforms for 3 different households. She ate fried yam for dinner more nights than she could count. She sent money whenever he asked, and sometimes before he asked, because the look on his face at the airport never left her. Then, slowly, the way rot moves through a wooden door, things changed. The evening calls became weekly calls. The weekly calls became occasional messages. The messages became one-word replies. Then came the first missed week. Then 2. Then a whole month went by and Sade sat in her shop at midnight, staring at a phone that had nothing to show her. She called, voicemail. She called again, voicemail. She texted, read receipt, no reply. She sent the money anyway because she did not know what else to do with love that had nowhere to go. 3 years passed, not in grief, or not only in grief, in work, in early mornings and late nights, and the specific kind of focus that comes when a woman decides that the only person she can rely on is herself. Sade expanded her shop. She registered a business, Stitches and Soul Limited, on the advice of her lawyer friend Amaka, who told her that a woman doing serious business needed serious structure. She hired 2 apprentices. She moved from Asoebi to bridal collections to a small corporate uniform contract with a school in Aripo. And then, carefully, quietly, she bought land in Mowe. She told no one, not her mother, not her aunties, not even Amaka. She simply identified the plot, negotiated the price, made the payment, and began construction. She registered the property under Stitches and Soul Limited, not because she was planning for anything in particular, but because Amaka had once said to her, "Never build what you cannot protect," and those words settled somewhere permanent inside her. She watched the bungalow rise the way she had watched everything else in her life, by showing up every single time, even when it was inconvenient, even when the contractor gave her headaches, even when the money ran short in the 3rd month and she had to defer her own salary for 6 weeks. By the time the roof went on, she had stopped crying about Kule entirely. She was not sure exactly when it had happened, but somewhere between pouring the foundation and tiling the bathroom, she had simply run out of tears for a man who never bothered to explain himself. The house was finished on a Tuesday. She went alone to walk through it the first time. She pressed her palm flat against the living room wall and stood there in the silence. She had built this from nothing, from fabric and early mornings and a machine that skipped stitches and a land her father left her that she sold for a man who stopped calling. She had built it anyway. The rumor reached her on a Friday afternoon through a WhatsApp message from Cynthia, her mutual friend who had the specific talent of delivering devastating news in a cheerful tone. "Sade, is that not Kule at Biodun's wedding last Saturday with a woman, no? See photo." The image loaded slowly, the way terrible things seem to arrive with unnecessary patience. And there he was, Kule, standing under a canopy of white and gold balloons, dressed in a well-fitted agbada, laughing with his whole chest at something the woman beside him had said. The woman was leaning into him with the easy comfort of someone who had been doing so for a long time. Her gele was tied perfectly. Her hand was resting on his arm. Sade smiled despite herself. She forwarded the image to a separate folder, put her phone face down on her work table, and finished hemming the dress she had been working on. She did every single stitch. She pressed the seam. She hung the dress on the rail. Then she picked up her phone and typed one message to Cynthia. "Do you have his contact or anyone who knows where he's staying?" Balogun came recommended by Amaka's uncle. He was a retired DSS officer with the kind of stillness that told you he had seen enough of the world to be unsurprised by any of it. He met Sade at a small restaurant in Ojodu, ordered a bottle of malt, and listened to everything she said without writing a single thing down. When she finished, he asked 3 questions.
"How long has he been back in Nigeria?" "I don't know," Sade said. "That's part of what I need to know." "Do you have a last known address, employer, or associate?" "I have a photo from last Saturday and a name." He nodded slowly. "And what exactly do you want from this? Evidence, location, or full background?" "Everything," Sade said. "I want to know exactly who I married." Balogun quoted his fee. She paid half up front without negotiating. He stood, tucked his phone into his breast pocket, and said simply, 2 weeks. It took him 11 days. She was in the middle of a fitting when he called. She excused herself, stepped into the back room, and listened without speaking for 4 minutes, while Balogun laid out the contents of the file he was about to bring her. Kule had been expelled from his program in Canada 8 months after arriving. Academic misconduct, the details were in the file. He never re-enrolled. He spent the following 2 years doing warehouse work and food delivery in Toronto, telling no one at home. He returned to Nigeria quietly 14 months ago. He had been living in a rented flat in Magudu. The woman in the photo was Temitope Olawale. She was a Lagos-based event coordinator from Abeokuta. They had conducted a traditional introduction ceremony in her family's compound in Ogun State 7 months ago. He had presented himself as a returnee with international work experience. Her family had been impressed. He had never filed for divorce from Sade, not in Nigeria, not anywhere. There was more. In the final months before his return, there was evidence of multiple transfers from a Nigerian account, an account that Sade recognized immediately because she was the one who had set it up for him before he traveled. The transfers were not to a university, they were to a betting platform and 2 different accounts she did not recognize. Sade stood in her back room with the phone pressed to her ear and felt something move through her that was not quite anger and not quite grief. It was something colder and more useful than both. "Bring me the file," Sade said. She read every page that evening, alone at her kitchen table in the Mowe house, with a cup of tea that went cold beside her because she forgot it existed. She read about the expulsion, she read Temitope's full name and date of birth, and the address of the introduction venue. She read the transaction records, she read the timeline, the precise documented timeline of how a man had taken 9 million naira of her sacrifice and spent it on a life that had nothing to do with what he had promised her. She turned the last page over, set it face down on the table. She thought about the land in a corridor. She thought about her father, who bought that land with 30 years of civil service salary, who called her his sharp girl every single morning of her childhood. She thought about selling it and watching the buyer drive away and telling herself it was for something. She thought about Kunle's face at the airport. "Wait for me." She picked up her pen and began writing a list. He came on a Saturday morning, which she had expected. Men like Kunle always chose weekends. Something about the relaxed atmosphere made them feel their requests were more reasonable. She heard the car pull up. She heard the gate. She did not move from her chair. When the knock came, she stood, smoothed her wrapper, and walked to the door. She opened it. Kunle stood there in a linen shirt and trousers, looking healthy and rested in the way that people look when they have not been carrying anything heavy. Temitope stood slightly behind him, beautiful and cautious, wearing the expression of a woman who had been told this would be simple. Kunle smiled, the same smile, the one she had once driven her whole life toward. "Sade," he said, "you look well." "Come in," Sade said. She stepped back. They entered. She closed the door quietly behind them. Kunle looked around the living room, at the tiled floors, the ceiling fan, the curtains she had picked herself from Balogun Market on a Sunday morning. Something shifted in his expression, a calculation. "This is a beautiful place," he said. "I know," Sade said. "I built it." She gestured to the seats. They sat. She remained standing. Kunle, he leaned forward, elbows on knees, the posture of a man about to be reasonable. "I know things between us have been complicated, but I am back now, and there are things we need to sort out. This house, for example. As my wife, whatever you acquired during our marriage..." "Kunle?" Her voice was quiet, not shaking, completely quiet. He stopped. "Before you continue," she said, "I need you to understand what you walked into today." She moved to the side table and picked up a brown envelope, set it on the center table in front of him. "Open it," she said. He looked at her. He looked at the envelope. He picked it up. The silence in the room as he read was the loudest thing Sade had ever heard. She watched his face move through the pages. She watched the confidence leave slowly, the way water drains, not all at once, but steadily, irreversibly, until there was nothing left. Temitope leaned over to see what he was reading. Her face changed too. "That is the full report from a private investigator," Sade said. "Your expulsion date, your employment records in Toronto, the betting transfers, and the introduction ceremony in Ogun State." She paused. "And your marriage certificate. Ours. Still valid, still active, never dissolved." Kunle set the papers down. He opened his mouth. "I am not finished," Sade said. She placed a second document on the table. "This is the title deed for this property. It is registered under Stitches and Soul Limited, my company. It is a corporate asset. Matrimonial property law does not apply to it. Not one room, not one tile, not the gate you just walked through." Temitope's hand had moved away from Kunle's arm. Sade noticed. You spent 9 million naira of my money, Kunle. My father's land, my cooperative loan, my skipped meals, and my broken sewing machine, and my 3 years of silence. 9 million naira. And you came here today to claim what I built from the wreckage of everything you wasted. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. Every word landed like something structural, like a load-bearing wall going up, not coming down. Kunle finally spoke. Sade, just listen. No, she cut him off cleanly. You have one option today. There is a postnuptial agreement and divorce papers in that envelope. You sign both. You forfeit every claim to this property and to anything under my company. You leave, and this ends here. He stared at her. If you do not sign, she continued, I file a report with the EFCC for financial misrepresentation. I contact Canadian immigration regarding your documented fraud, and I pursue bigamy charges because what you did in Ogun State 7 months ago, while still legally married to me, carries a prison sentence in this country. The room was completely still. Temitope stood up slowly. She looked at Kunle, a long, devastating look, and said nothing. She walked to the window and stood with her back to the room. If this story is hitting different right now, pause and drop a comment. Tell us what you think Kunle deserves. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. We post new stories every week and you don't want to miss what is coming. Kunle sat with the papers in his hands for a long time. Sade did not rush him. She had waited 3 years already. She could wait another 10 minutes. He looked up once, the way a man looks when he's searching for a version of the situation that still works in his favor, and finding nothing. His jaw tightened. He looked back down at the papers. You planned this, he said quietly. No, Sade said. You planned nothing. I simply prepared for every possibility. There is a difference. He picked up the pen she had placed on the table before they arrived.
His hand moved slowly, the way hands move when they are signing away something they had convinced themselves belonged to them. The scratch of the pen on paper was the only sound in the room. He signed the postnuptial agreement. He signed the divorce papers. He placed the pen down and sat back, and something about the way he sat, slightly collapsed, shoulders dropped, told Sade that whatever version of himself he had walked in with was gone. The 9 million naira, she said, sliding one final document across. With accumulated interest, the figure stands at 15 million naira. I am not pursuing it today. Consider that my parting generosity. But if you ever return to this property, if you contact me for any reason other than finalizing the divorce proceedings through our lawyers, I will pursue every naira in court. Kunle looked at the figure on the page. He said nothing. You can go, Sade said. He stood. He did not look around the house again. He did not look at the tiled floors or the ceiling or the walls he had tried to claim. He walked to the door with the particular gait of a man who had arrived somewhere expecting to collect and leaving with nothing. He paused at the door. For one moment, Sade thought he was going to turn around and say something, an apology, an explanation, even an argument, something that would require her to respond, something that would give him one last moment of her attention. He walked out without turning around. The door swung shut behind him. Temitope had not moved from the window the entire time. She stood with her arms folded across her chest, staring at the compound outside. Sade watched her for a moment. The set of her shoulders, the way she was holding herself together through sheer structure alone. The 9 million naira, Temitope said, finally. Her voice was steady but only just. He told me he was a returnee. He told me he had built a life abroad, that he came back to settle down properly, that he had no attachments. I know, Sade said. I had no idea about you. She turned from the window. Her eyes were dry, but the effort of keeping them that way was visible. I want you to know that, whatever you think of me standing here, I don't think anything of you, Sade said, and she meant it entirely. You were deceived. That is not a character flaw. That is what happens when someone decides that your life is something they can use for their own story. Temitope looked at her for a long moment. Something passed between them. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. The particular recognition of two women who had looked at the same man and seen entirely different people, because he had shown them entirely different faces. What do I do now? Temitope asked. It came out smaller than she intended. You go and see a lawyer today, not tomorrow, today. The introductory ceremony has no legal standing because he was already married, but you need documentation of that for your own protection. And you cut every financial tie you have with him before he finds a new story to tell someone else. Temitope nodded slowly. She picked up her bag from the chair. She paused at the door, the same door Kunle had walked through, and looked back once. You are very calm for everything he put you through. Sade considered this. I used up all my noise 3 years ago in an empty shop talking to a phone that never answered. I decided I was not going to give him any more of my sound. Temitope left. Sade stood alone in her living room. She stood in the silence and let it settle around her, not the silence of waiting, which she knew too well, which had a specific texture of anxiety and hope wound together. This was different. This was the silence of a thing that was finished, of a chapter that had been read completely and closed. She walked to the kitchen and made herself a fresh cup of tea. She stood at the kitchen window while it steeped, looking out to the small compound, the gate Kunle had walked through, the pawpaw tree she had planted in the corner 3 months ago because she had wanted something living in the yard, the patch of red laterite soil that still needed to be paved. She thought about her father, about the land in Ikorodu that was gone now, sold and built on by someone else entirely. She had grieved that land for a long time. She had carried the guilt of it, the feeling that she had taken something her father worked 30 years for and traded it for a man's ambition. But, standing here now, in a house she had built with her own business, her own decisions, her own stitches and soul, she understood something she had not been able to reach before. Her father had left her that land because he believed she was the kind of woman who could build something from whatever she had. He had not been wrong. She had just needed different materials than the ones he left her. She had built anyway. She carried her tea to the living room. She sat in the chair by the window, her chair, in her house, on her land, under a company that bore the name of the thing she had always been, and she opened her sketchbook. A new design had been forming in her mind for 3 weeks. A bridal piece, something structured at the shoulders, flowing from the waist, with hand-stitch detailing along the neckline that would take patience and precision and a very steady hand. She began to sketch. Outside the compound, she heard Kunle's car pull away from the street. She did not look up. The pencil moved across the page, clean, deliberate, absolutely certain of where it was going. She walked until the afternoon light shifted and her tea went cold again, and this time she did not mind. Her phone buzzed twice, Amaka checking in, then Cynthia asking for an update with 3 question marks and a praying hands emoji. She would reply later. Right now, she was in the middle of something. The sketch was coming together beautifully, the kind of piece that announced itself when a woman walked into a room, the kind that said, I was made by someone who understands that fabric, like a life, must be built with intention. She was going to call it the foundation. There are women who hold the ground when everything else shifts, women who sell what they have, build what they can, and refuse to let grief be the last word written about them. Sade was one of them. She did not need Kunle to fail for her story to matter, but when he came back to collect what he never built, he found out exactly what 3 years of silence and sacrifice and absolute refusal to give up can produce. He came back for a house. What he found was a woman who had already moved on without him, who had already built the next thing, who was already in that chair by the window, sketching the thing after that. The Japa goat had returned thinking he could walk back into her story as though he had never left it, but Sade had long since written a new one. And in that story, there was no space for a man who confused her patience for weakness and her love for a resource. There never would be again. That is the end of today's story, and if you watched all the way to this point, you already know you are exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. Drop a comment right now and tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We have viewers from Lagos to London to Houston to Johannesburg, and we want to know where you are watching from today. If this story moved you, share it with one person who needs to hear it. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is your sign. Hit that button, turn on the bell, and come back next week because the next story is already waiting for you, and it is going to leave you speechless.
Like this video if Sade deserved every single thing she built. She did.